Okay, so we're ready to start session 4 of the after party, and thanks everybody for joining us. We're having a great time with this, and a special shout out to folks who are joining us uh, by recording through the week or different times. It's great that you're able to join us as well. So thank you for that. All right, so we are moving on this evening. Oh, where'd my thing go? There it is. To our next part of the quadrant. So we will kick in right in with our first video and get started right away here. There's that, and that, and that. Everybody remember to mute.
In this after party so far, we've been talking about the importance of making this big shift from the what to the how, and how this big shift involves prioritizing spiritual values, two spiritual values in particular, humility and hope. And last session, we talked about how this creates a profile that you can sort of locate yourself on your discipleship path. And we talked about the combatant. So the combatant, to refresh, is somebody who is actually low in humility, but high in hope. All right, the combatant thinks they're right, the other side's wrong. This session, we're going to talk about the profile of the exhausted. And the exhausted is really the mirror image of the combatant. So the exhausted actually is high in humility, because the exhausted isn't sure they have all the answers, and they're willing to actually possibly entertain other answers. But the exhausted is low in hope. They're ready to give up if they haven't given up already. That's the exhausted. David, why is this profile, the profile of the exhausted, so important in politics right now?
Well, it's really important in politics for one very simple reason, which is that's the majority of Americans. So the majority of Americans right now are in what's called the exhausted majority. Almost 70% of Americans fit broadly within the category of an exhausted majority. These are people who, they long for compromise. They come from the right, from the left, they come from the middle, but they long for dialogue and they despair at the same time. They feel like their voices don't count, or they're drowned out by the loudest, angriest people. Maybe they venture a thought or an idea on social media and they're quickly angry uncle, or their extremely angry niece, you name it. They're tired at the very mention of politics. We need the voices of those people who actually long for compromise.
Russell, talk about a particular profile of the exhausted in the church. I'm thinking about pastors, because you speak to a lot of pastors. What's going on for them?
Well, pastoral work is exhausting anyway. You're having to be with people on their deathbed, on their wedding day, and in their spiritual crisis. So you're full of a person. And then you add to it this expectation that the pastor ought to be an avatar of my politics, which often for a lot of pastors, the expectation is not just that my pastor agrees with me on all my political ideas, but that my pastor articulates all of my political ideas as though they were revealed truth. And what you have are often pastors who, if they're not careful, they start to become depleted by this. Some of them leave.
Don't demand that your pastor or anyone else around you agree with you on everything. You need to recognize your own frailty and fallenness. And guess what? 5 years from now, some of the things you might feel the most strident about right now, you might look back on and say, oh, oops, that wasn't quite right.
We need pastors to step forward in some ways and not in others.
Okay.
Pastors shouldn't feel as though I need to be an expert on every possible issue. But what a pastor does need is to say, in addition to thinking through what are the spiritual needs of my congregation, what do they need to know, a lot of times pastors are also thinking through blowback am I going to be dealing with? And so sometimes that can create a risk aversion where the pastor doesn't really want to speak to anything that's going to make someone angry. And so having a pastor who's able to, from the message of the Word of God, remind us of the fact that life is more than just whatever we're debating right now. And also to have a sense of, I cannot be your mascot for whatever your particular issue is, and still effectively lead you spiritually. And frankly, that's what you need. Right. And so a lot of the people who just want a pastor who's a cable talking head, they actually don't want that when they're sick.
Yeah, that's right.
Or when their marriage falls apart.
So if you're a lay member of the exhausted majority, or you are a pastor who is exhausted, we need you. The church needs you, God needs you, and let's together step forward.
With every place on this quadrant, I think we could make a mistake by thinking, I am one of these, and I have been, and I always will be in some sort of... That's not the case. It describes a place where one is, and maybe a tendency that one has, where you tend to go. For me, I think the exhausted phase was something that came at a particular time in life, after a great deal of frenetic activity. And I think, as with so many other things, see the immediate fruit of your efforts. There's a way of exhausting the soul and exhausting the heart. Physical world, you do something, you press at something. Politics exhausts so many people right now because it demands too much. When politics is demanding one's entire identity and belonging, then there is a kind of vigilance that comes with watching that all of the time, that it just isn't sustainable. All of us are a lot more complicated than whatever our political views are. And once we start to see ourselves only in those terms, or preeminently in those terms, we lose something of our humanity. And ultimately, the energy that's directed toward that strips away the ability to respond as human beings. And that's what the church often seems like. And that's especially true after we've come through the past several years with Trump era, the COVID era, any number of things. We're in news cycles that don't ever seem to end. I used to say, oh, I dread election years because election years make Christians go crazy. We're in a time right now where we're always in an election year because it's not just that there's 24 hours a day cable news, there's 24 hours a day social media prompts. You just can't sustain a consistent level of engagement through all of that. And that's especially true when we have the sorts of conflicts that become personal. So it's not just you and I disagree on this, it's you and I are of different countries, or within the church, different religions. So that leads to a sense of exhaustion as well. You just don't have the energy to continue to engage because you don't see that time of quiet in between. It just doesn't happen right now. Well, the partisan mind is tired. Mind, for one thing, can't deal with the complexity of human nature, my human nature or yours, because the partisan mind is surprised to see goodness and image of God on the other side, whatever that is. One of the reasons that we're in this situation is that we're not enlivened by biblical doctrine or biblical discipleship. We're instead really enlivened by whatever proves me to be right and you to be wrong. And in this secularized sort of environment, including secularized within the church, those are usually whatever's the primary point of controversy in the world around me. And what's usually the primary point of controversy are political or culture war issues. That's why I almost never see a church that is on the verge of splitting over the Trinity. I almost never see a church that's on the verge of splitting anymore over what's the right way to worship, even though we saw so much of that, say, 15, 20 years ago. Instead, splitting over the very same things that are being screamed about all around us. One of the things that I recognize now often, I have pastors who give me almost the exact same story of preaching on something and just sort of parenthetically saying, turn the other cheek. For instance, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. To have people angry and coming up afterward and challenging the weakness and the refusal to fight on those things. And what was really disturbing to me is that inevitably when the pastor would say, well, I'm literally quoting Jesus Christ, the person would say, well, yeah, but that worked at one time, but it won't work now. Now we have to fight. As though there's some time period where there's an escape hatch from the Sermon on the Mount. And in many cases, what you had happening were people who would say, well, we're okay with the doctrinal teaching that we can find in Paul. It's Jesus we have a problem with. So we don't have a problem with the atonement. We have a problem with the person who is on the cross. That is a dangerous place to be. I realized at one point that social media particularly was exhausting me because I found myself losing the ability to maintain attention. I always needed to know what's going on. So if I was on a plane that didn't have Wi-Fi, I noticed that I would start to feel like, oh wait, I don't know what's going on. And I really found myself noticing this when I went to, there's a monastery in Kentucky that I go to often to sort of get away from everything. And I was there in the quiet praying, and I noticed that I kept checking Twitter. And I said, I can't do this. I'm here to get away from everything and pray. And I put my phone away, and I noticed that I was agitated. And when I really explored it, I realized what I really was feeling like is I'm vulnerable because I don't know what's going on. And it was at this sort of primal level, a sense of almost feeling like walking into a dark house and not knowing if there's something there ready to jump out at you. And that's a really unhealthy way to see things. Social media exhausts a person by giving these hits of dopamine. Every time you send something out there and somebody responds to it or hits its target, that ultimately strips down your abilities. Like anything else, you need more and more of it in order to get the same result. Social media also exhausts because people can get a skewed view of what people think of them by looking at social media. It's a sense in which I ultimately said, I need to stop looking at Twitter replies because it messes with my mind. It can give you this sense of siege mentality. Everybody hates me. I mean, and that can happen for anybody. For some people, it's because they don't get response the way that they want it on social media. They think nobody cares about me, which isn't true, but it can feel like it. Someone said, I realized everybody that I meet in person says I'm the greatest person ever, and everybody on Twitter says I'm horrible. And neither of those things are true. Neither of those things could be true, but it's the nature of how it works. That can lead you to a place where if you're sort of constantly on guard, looking around, you're going to become exhausted.
Right. Back. So what strikes you about so first of all, who among us here would find yourself in the exhausted category? Almost half of us, maybe. Yeah. All right. So we fit in that 70% box, right? So many who find ourselves in that place. Um, all right. So Bill, you're unmuted, and then Shirley, you'll have something
I
you'd like to share.
I don't know how to mute myself.
Okay. Okay.
I've always had this problem.
Okay. No problem. So Bill, did you have something?
I'm
Oh, you'll
sorry.
need to unmute now. There we go. There we go.
No, I just forgot to mute myself. So
Okay. All right.
I was so
All right.
exhausted I didn't even have
Yeah,
the
right.
ability to unmute.
All right.
Well, I
Gene?
intentionally unmuted myself.
Yeah, Gene, what you got for us?
I was just thinking social media has no grip on me. I am invisible to social media. And I'm just so grateful that I am. I'm just thinking of teenagers who are trying to stay in tune with social media and how devastating it can be to their mental health. And I just wish people didn't let it rule their lives because I think it's so damaging. And I'm grateful I'm not involved. I also don't have a TV, and I'm grateful for that too.
Oh my goodness. Wow. All right. Let's see. Just a second. Bill, Kathy, did you want to say something? You're unmuted. I wasn't sure.
No, it's just me.
All right. All right. Bill, what you got?
Well, I used to be very active. I think it was probably because I felt that it was important for me to kind of have a voice and to respond to best people. But then I came to Russell Moore's conclusion. Now I only respond to my daughters and my wife and maybe a few other former students that I know who are doing various things. And I feel the other thing is it is exhausting. There's no value to it to me to know what everybody's thinking about Trump or whatever, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Gravels.
Yeah, the pastor said something that struck me.
Uh-oh.
And now it seems like every year is election year. It really seems like for a lot of people, every day is election year. It's like a daily barrage. And I think he was telling a story about himself in a very nice way about going to a monastery and being not being able to disconnect. But I think the secret to it is the disconnecting. Otherwise, the saturation is inevitable. It could be anything. It could be about sports. It could be about your neighborhood HOA. It could be anything. Uh, but it's always there to get over involved to reach way beyond a thermostatic control, to bring yourself back in and say, this is just a part of my life. When I'm allowing it to be saturating, obviously it's going to be exhausting. So it's creating our awareness of that entrapment and doing our best to stay out of it.
Yeah, yeah. I know I've got, notifications turned on for several of the publications that I subscribe to online. And so, those notifications will pop up. Um, Sometimes from all three of those publications, I'll get the same notification, about the World Series or somebody who died or those kind of things. But that keeps me always paying attention. And sometimes I wonder if I really should be doing that. But I do want to know when stuff happens. So it's something that I wonder sometimes, that dopamine hit of constantly getting that information. Dave, what you got?
Well, what I try to do, and not always successful, is to limit the amount of time that and I'm on like Facebook and Instagram, and then, look at news feeds or whatever. I try to limit it to a couple hours a day. I'm not always successful. So the key for me is to get outside and leave my phone in the house. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think I said last week I'm an exhausted combatant, so that's where I'm at. So I do feel some of that stuff. I mean, I'm not a big commenter, I don't comment a lot on people. Although I must say, then the local election issue, I was trying to give people advice, but on the national scene, it's just not worth it. I mean, I've done it a couple times and it just goes insanely crazy and just like that. So I just don't even engage on that front.
Yeah, I think many of us have transitioned over the last 10 years from taking the bait, when somebody puts it out there on an issue or something, and engaging in a back and forth, for who knows how long. I I remember this was years ago now, and I'm sure he unfriended me because I haven't seen his stuff in a long time. But there was a guy who was a teacher at my high school who popped up, and he was friends on Facebook with all of us from the high school. Um, but he was just saying stupid things, and I thought, okay, normally I don't engage on these things, but this guy's got an audience of a lot of my old friends, right? And so I thought it's worth it. Oh my gosh, no, it's not. So I don't do that ever anymore. So in some ways, my Facebook feed has become much more like what we want it to be, which is just people's family news now, because everybody has given up on the idea. What's that saying? The best way to change somebody's mind is to get into a Facebook fight with them, right? Something like that. So which is crazy. So, all right. Anybody else have another thought before we slide into the next video here? All right. Very good. Let me pull that up. Hopefully. Yep.
Well, the exhausted are the ones who are being drained of hope. And Russell has described something of what that feels like. Now, most of the exhausted majority haven't gotten exhausted because they've been engaged in national or even local politics and have lost. The reason why most in the exhausted majority are getting exhausted is not by what they're doing, but rather by what they're hearing. It's by the stories that they're consuming about politics. We perhaps have tasted a little bit of that bitterness, a little bit of that fight and exhaustion, really in our relationships with family and friends. And we know how exhausting that feels. and how it does make us feel like we're losing hope. Sometimes that experience happens in face-to-face relationships with family and friends, and sometimes that happens on social media. Social media especially exhausts us. It exhausts us because social media is built on categorizing us into various us versus thems. That's how social media works. It groups us into us and thems, and then it will tee up content that makes us afraid of the them. That's how it gets clicks. Fear and anxiety are incredibly powerful motivators, and so social media knows that and tees up the latest story of how awful them is and what the latest thing that them is doing to get us. As we bathe ourselves in these kinds of us versus them stories through social media, we get exhausted. We lose hope. You see, when we consume stories on social media, we're not actually in relationship. We're not actually in relationship with the people that those stories are about. It's a false, faux relationship. The only stories that are actually real stories are stories of real relationships with people in our lives. So the Jesus practices for his how of politics involve stopping some things and starting some things. Jesus invites us to generate our own stories, stories of relationship especially with those who may differ from us politically. How can we actually conduct relationships that actually build hope in all of us? Here's a story that showcases how this happens.
I'm Nancy French, and I am married to someone you've already heard from in this course, David French. I'm a best-selling author and an investigative journalist. Being married to David is sometimes difficult when I see the way that the public perceives him, especially in social media.
I'm Kathy Kattenberg. I think I joined Twitter around 2007. I'm a political addict. I started reading National Review. David French was an editor and a writer on National Review at that time, had been for years, and I started reading David and disagreeing with him vehemently on everything. David and I disagree on abortion. That's one issue that David and I will never agree on. I'm sure of it. We will never agree on that. Well, being me, I start telling him exactly what I think. I would tweet it. Do you want women to die? Women have a right to control their own bodies. The woman is more important than the fetus. All things like that.
He's criticized sometimes for legitimate reasons, for disagreements on issues, but most of the time it is personal and it is awful.
I would get angry, and then I would respond even more angrily the next time.
In 2016, I wrote an article in the Washington Post that detailed my story of sexual abuse. I was abused by someone who was my vacation Bible school teacher. So I wrote an article. I wanted to publish it anonymously, but they don't do that at the Washington Post. And so I thought about it, decided to go ahead and publish under my name. I'd never talked about it before. The article went super viral. I got all kinds of social media response. I got emails from probably hundreds of people who told me stories of their own sexual abuse. Additionally, a lot of people criticized me. They were terribly uncharitable, and it hurt my feelings a great deal because a lot of those people were from my quote-unquote tribe. And so I decided in that moment that if anyone showed me kindness on social media, I was just going to follow them. Previously, I only followed people that I sort of ideologically aligned with, but at this point, I was like, forget it, I'm going to go with kindness. And so I started following a bunch of people. One of the people that showed me kindness was named Kathy Kattenberg.
I always knew there was a person named Nancy French, and she was married to David French. I had looked at her profile, but I didn't know anything about her. Nancy shared a very personal and very painful story of her own. She herself had had tragedy in her life, and I was just filled with compassion for her. So I wrote to her and I said something along the lines of, I don't agree with your husband on things, but I have so much respect for you and for your courage. I think it's enormously brave of you to have written an article for the Washington Post so everybody knows what happened to you.
I clicked follow, and every time I logged into Twitter, I saw her post, and she was not a huge fan of David. I just sort of scrolled past it and scrolled past it and scrolled past it. For about 4 months, every time I checked Twitter, I would see Kathy insulting David. So COVID hits, and I see a message from Kathy posted publicly, and she said, "I will never eat again. I am stuck in this apartment. I cannot get groceries because of the COVID overload on the grocery delivery system." And she said, "I just can't get any food. I don't think I'll ever get food." I didn't know it at the time, but Kathy was disabled and she couldn't leave her house. So Kathy posts that she's food insecure, and she was so against David. She disliked him so much. However, I sent her a direct message and I said, "Hi, I'm Nancy French. I'm David French's wife. I saw your post. What can I do to help?"
She contacted me on Twitter, on direct message, and she offered to help.
My phone rings and it's Kathy, and she has this beautiful New York accent, and I sound like I fell off a turnip truck, and we laughed at that. And she was asking me, like, "Why did you reach out?" And I said, "This is a treacherous time. What can we do to help?"
It was just astonishing to hear her voice on the phone. And we worked on finding a grocery that would deliver the food.
And that whole process was pretty funny because I had to talk to Kathy on the phone, and it was stuff like she wanted diced tomatoes, she wanted bananas, beef, just basic stuff. But when you talk to somebody about their food needs, it's very intimate. I placed the orders, nothing happened. The next day I called her back. "Hey, Kathy, I'm still working on it." We talked every day. At one point I was like, "Kathy, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I cannot get you food." And I said, "The only thing I think we can do at this moment is to pray." And she said, "Okay, go ahead and pray." Well, I do not pray randomly with strangers over the phone, let alone praying with someone who I sort of considered hated us so much. So Kathy Kattenberg and I, together on the phone, prayed that God would send her food. And it was very awkward, and we laughed.
I can't believe that any human being would do something like that, so personally kind as that.
We talked about a lot of topics. The most hot button topic was abortion. We're very pro-life. She's had multiple abortions. And so she told me that story. And when we had that conversation, it was so moving to me because her story was devastating. And so instead of telling her that I disagreed with abortion, I just said, "I'm very sorry for the circumstances that led up to that." And so I just showed her compassion. We worked and we worked, and finally Kathy calls me and she's just crying. She was like, "You're not going to believe it. I have, 2 pounds of meat and 4 bananas. 30 minutes later, the phone rings again. My other orders had also come through. So now she had 6 pounds of meat. She had like 25 bananas. We had probably 30 cans of diced tomato. I mean, she was just like drowning in food.
For her to take a person that she didn't trust, because I was always attacking her husband, and to call me and arrange to get me food, it was huge. I mean, I couldn't believe it. And from that point on, we were friends.
I wanted to go meet Kathy in person because we had bonded. I got invited to perform at a storytelling event at Lincoln Center, which was a huge honor for me. And I thought maybe since it was close to where Kathy lived, she might want to go.
I went to see Nancy.
I was backstage. I had to give David Kathy's cell phone number. So when she arrived, David extends his arm and he escorts her into Lincoln Center. I knew somewhere that David and Kathy were sitting together listening to my story, and that cracked me up so much. It made the whole night just sort of more magical.
He was so kind. And it was the first time that I could really see graphically that a person can think very differently from me politically and be kind. And David is very, very kind. He doesn't have a mean bone in his body. Oh my God!
Hey there! It's so good to see you.
Oh my God!
How are you doing?
I'm fine.
It's so good to see you.
And so we've kept in touch for 2 years, and we've gotten closer and closer and closer.
Nancy is the best friend that I have ever had in my life. She's not just my best friend now. I have never had a friend like Nancy before in my life.
You've heard a story of a relationship, rather than being born on social media, actually taking place with each other in real life. Now take some time to reflect on this story. How did this story make you feel?
Right. So what did you think about what Curtis had to say? And and he was referring, just to bring it back, he was kind of talking about social media and the algorithms that feed our particular political bents, right? They send us articles that the algorithm knows is going to lead us to pursue more access to more stories and that sort of thing. So, and which exposes us to more advertising, which benefits somebody, but certainly not us, right? So, so there's that, what Curtis was talking about, and then this great story about Nancy and Kathy. So what struck you that you'd share with us about? Susan, you're unmuted. Was that on purpose? No. Okay.
Well, I found it.
Yeah. Good.
I found it
Okay. Bill and then Kim.
profoundly moving. I mean, talk about something that seems unlikely, and yet when somebody was willing to reach out, Nancy in this case, I guess, to be helpful because of human compassion, or maybe compassion because of the love of Jesus, whatever motivated her, it just revolutionized the relationship or developed a relationship that seemed like it could be absolutely impossible up to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And even, yeah, and that, I mean, that followed Kathy's willingness to reach out to the wife of this person that she considered you know the devil. Kathy willing to reach out and thank Nancy for telling her story first, right? And that got it started. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Kim?
Well, I kind of had the opposite thing happen with me because we lived in Lyman and I knew people really well. And I had a gift shop, and people would come in and visit with me. I was in the very large minority of people of my political persuasion out there. But we all had to get along because we did business with each other, and we helped each other when things got hard. But when we moved up here, I started seeing, and I stayed on Facebook because I wanted to keep in touch with the people in line. I wanted to know what was going on there. And I had several friends who were posting really horrible things, just in this political climate, and I had known them before without knowing really how deeply they felt about their political convictions. And it hurt. It really hurt my heart. So I unfollowed so many people from out there because I didn't want to know that about them. I wanted to know the good, kind part about them. And really on Facebook, I try not to if I share things, I try to share things that people shouldn't be able to argue with. Like, I just recently shared a thing about how we can do better at donating to food banks, because some of the products that we donate, people can't use because they need butter or they need milk or they need a can opener. Those are the types of things I try to share, even though I feel very strongly about my political convictions, and I have for my whole adult life. But I don't want to purposely offend people who don't feel the same way.
Yeah, thank you.
The other thing when
Judy?
I was watching this, actually, Kim, I thought you were going to mention it. The article or it was a Facebook article posting about the woman who had lost her job and went to work in the coffee shop and was putting up the messages with her coffee cups on the wall. And it just kind of crossed this bridge of people who obviously were on opposite sides of the spectrum in terms of their views and values, perhaps, or not the values, probably views politically, whatever. But the value was about people and just how this had changed everyone coming in and wanting to sort of pay it forward. And I thought it was a really good way of us, again, going back to what's important, people and connections, and focusing on that so that we can kind of live together, even in our differences.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Kim's got a really good
Sue?
it's a Facebook post, actually, right, Kim? That you got it from. I don't know.
You shared it with.
It's really good. It's about how these personal connections can overcome the political divide. So it's really good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When I was
Sue,
high school,
did you have something?
a group called up with
No.
people, and we sang a song. I think Glenn Campbell wrote it. You got to show a little kindness. That's what I got to thinking about with that. That's what started that whole breakdown that breaking of the ice was they both showed kindness to one another, and they just that's what their focus was then, and it just created a wonderful relationship for them. So yeah, show a little kindness.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Patricia, did you have something? And then
Yeah, it
Kathy.
was just I don't know, there's a part of it that says if you get to know a person, you can go beyond the political views. You see that person as a person versus when you're on Facebook. I mean, you can say anything, you can throw anything out there, and it's like, okay, is this going to stick? Is this not going to stick, or whatever? But when you come face to face with somebody and have a conversation and are willing to listen to what they're saying and realize that they're coming from it from a different direction, and you can always agree to disagree. I mean, I do that with some family members, and it's hard, but I still respect their views on a lot of things. I still accept them for who they are. So, and the two ladies, it was like, you're attacking my husband. But, when you begin to talk with each other, you establish a different relationship. So I think that's one of the things that we need to realize is that we do have to, and I don't know how we do it, reach out and be accepting of an opposing view. And how do we resolve it to come to something that's more meaningful, that we're not throwing daggers at each other?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's striking that you know, Nancy was pulled into a deeper relationship with Kathy because she was reminded that we all have to eat, right? I mean, talk about the most basic common ground you can find, you know, and I think this is happening on a larger systemic level now with the SNAP benefits and food banks needs and all of that. But that's fascinating. Yeah. Okay, Kathy, and then I saw Jennifer unmuted too.
Yeah, I have found over the years that when you actually do talk to people, you find out that people are just people. Surprisingly enough, we also to be surprised by that, uh, which is odd. And something that I've been using the last few years is my vulnerability card. So anytime I run into somebody and I think there's going to be a problem, I will ask for a favor. Could you get McCain? Could you, yada yada. And if you expose your vulnerability to somebody, they feel better about you for some reason. So that's my magic thing at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. All right, Jennifer, and then the Gravels. Looks like.
I have a dear friend who, when our house flooded in 2017, called immediately. I was out of the state. My husband was here alone. She called and said, I'm coming over. I'm bringing buckets. I'm bringing sponges. I'm bringing rags. She wrung the flood water out of clothes and took them to her house to wash them. Carried things upstairs. You name it. She was here to help. She's in a book club with me, and her mouth is full of Jesus. And when somebody's got a health crisis in their family, she's the first one to say, we should pray. But some of the things that she believes and posts on Facebook, I don't understand. And I don't know if this was what you were talking about, Kim, with people that you thought you knew and now, wait a minute, how can this be the same person? We're no longer friends on Facebook. And that's probably for the best. And we have to be very careful what we talk about when we get together in person, because the signs that she posts in her front yard, I would not have in mine. And it's just gotten to be a very hot situation. And it's too bad that, but I feel like I thought she was such a good person. I still think she's such a good person here, but then there's this.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling sometimes, isn't it? Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, yeah. Gravels, do you have something to?
Yeah, I was remembering as we're talking about this topic about there's a famous story, it's a true story, about a rabbi in Omaha who was castigated vehemently by a Ku Klux Klan leader there, who happened to be a man who was totally disabled in a wheelchair. And this rabbi endured all sorts of castigation and won him over time with his kindness and compassion to where this man had the rabbi at his bedside at his death and actually converted to Judaism. But this is a famous story, and I'm sure if you Google it with just that information, it would come up. But I probably got it written upstairs somewhere. But it's been written about by various authors because it's such a it's reaching beyond the pale to a depth that you didn't think you were possible to find the compassion. It reminds me of what's the famous woman from World War II that was in a camp, Jewish camp. She was from the Netherlands.
Corrie ten Boom.
Corrie ten Boom.
Ten Boom.
Yeah. It reminds me of that. And so it's just, it isn't always possible, for sure. But I'm heartened by reading about things like that, where people just tried not to give up and eventually found that connection.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
I
Gene.
remember about that story, Glenn, is that the guy spent all of his time sending out these hateful messages.
Yeah.
And he said, well, this is how I was taught by my parents. This is what I thought I should be doing. And then when he saw another way to be, it was like, wow, I just did what I was taught.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
You know, I'm not on social media. I just I mean, I can't even remember the last time I looked at Facebook or anything. And I think I'm healthier for that. I have other unhealthy things, but healthier for that. But even before social media existed, you know, when I was in the corporate working world, there are lots of times where stuff happens and you just have to say, there is something going on in that person's life that is resulting in this kind of backlash. Because, you know, if you wait long enough, you may or may not learn what it is, but there's a reason. There's a reason for it. And, you know, somebody mentioned, you know, because that's how you grew up, or, you know, in this story, this very poignant story that was on the video, it's because, you know, there was some story behind the one woman being, you know, having multiple abortions. Well, there's a story. And when you understand the story behind, then you can see what somebody else's life is like. But when all you see is the backlash and the thrashing, then you can't learn. You can't learn from, you can't be compassionate until, or it's difficult to be compassionate until you understand the story better.
Wow, you couldn't have had a better segue for us, Sue, into the last video here. So let's go to there, and then at the end, I want to pop back to some of what they said at the very beginning about pastors, and I want to draw you all into a little conversation about that. So let's go with our last video here first, and then get our responses.
Social media is absolutely not the best way to engage with another human being. You know, when I watched the story you just saw, what it tells me is that it is possible to bridge incredibly. I'm not naive. I know that you can reach out, they can rebuff it. I know that you can try to reach fallen world. But I also know that if we treat people as social media caricatures, if we view them entirely through the prism of their political point of view and ascribe all of our judgments about them based on their political point of view, we're just doing it wrong. Everybody has a story. I'm reminded, was it Chesterton who said, "Be kind, everyone faces a hard battle"? We don't know the battle that other people face. And by giving them charity, by giving them grace, we actually have an opportunity to enter into their lives. Again, nothing is guaranteed. It's a risk to reach out to somebody. But if you don't break through that social media barrier, you don't even give yourself a chance to have the kind of relationship that Nancy and Kathy have developed. I know it is incredibly easy to make judgments about people based on social media. I'm somebody who spends time on social media as part of my job. As a columnist, I'm supposed to not just write my columns, but also talk about them, promote them on social media. So I'm there a lot, and I know what it's like to be seen entirely through that prism, as if I'm nothing other than the pieces that I write or the tweets that I send. And frankly, you know, it's in many ways only a very small part of me. One thing that I've learned is that sometimes the most aggressive people online are also some of the people who are in the most pain. People who are battling the worst demons, so to speak. And they're not necessarily political. It could be personal. And a lot of people, when they're vulnerable and they're hurting, they don't actually present as vulnerable. They present as very angry. They present as somebody who's lashing out, who's short-tempered. You know, when we know someone in their personal lives, we often are much more able to give them grace because we know their backstory. We know that they're going through something difficult. But often when we confront someone on social media, we don't even wonder if there's a backstory. We don't even think for a second whether they might be going through something difficult. I get a lot of backlash. People get very angry at me because of the positions that I take in politics. And I try very hard not to respond in kind because I don't know what that person is going through. I don't know their backstory. And if I use my platform, if I use my following to unleash on that individual, even if it's sort of perceived as self-defense, I could be inflicting real harm on them. And so I'm trying to be very careful about this. I'm mindful of the scripture that says, "A bruised reed he will not break, a smoldering wick he will not snuff out." Speaking of Jesus, well, as a follower of Jesus, I don't want to be a person who's breaking the bruised reeds, who's snuffing out the smoldering wicks. So yeah, there are moments when I have to respond, maybe to clear up some falsehood, or I have to respond to clear up some mistake. But as a general matter, I try very hard not to lash back out when people lash at me, because I'm mindful of this reality. And this has been brought home to me many times over the past several years, especially as our political rhetoric has escalated. Often when I learn backstories, even backstories of people who've said vicious things about me, and my response to it changes from anger to sympathy and sometimes empathy, because I've learned that there is something else happening here. And that's why we can't accept people as sort of the two-dimensional caricature we see in a tweet or we see in a Facebook post. They're much more complicated than that. And by default, extending that kindness, extending that charity, you have a chance at achieving what Nancy and Kathy achieved by forming a real relationship.
Yeah. So you can see exactly how Sue had led us into that perfectly. Any responses? Any thoughts about everybody's got a battle, right? I mean, how does that strike you?
Well, I just wanted to reflect that I don't have a battle. I mean, my life is fabulous. So I can extend grace, I can be charitable because I don't have anything I am fighting. So why not just be generous and kind? Nobody has to give me, some kind of sympathy or understanding because I have everything easy.
Yeah, it's important for us to understand to recognize the differences, right, between our stories and other people's stories. Yeah, so I appreciate that, Gene. Yeah. Anybody else have an experience of that, of discovering that somebody else's battle that they're fighting, maybe that changed your perspective on how to relate to them? I mean, this happens to pastors all the time. I mean, we hear people's stories, that oftentimes very few others know, and so uh, how often it happens that something's going on publicly in the life of a church, but we know what's going on privately in the life of that person or those people, that may be impacting how or why they are acting out the way they are, in publicly, in the community. That it can be um, uh, very profound. I mean, how you then relate to those folks, what kind of care you can offer. And this goes, I'm sharing this not just because it's pastors that have this, but each of you may have that opportunity at some point, right, to speak into or serve into the battle that somebody's facing, that you may be privileged to know about, in a way that the rest of the world doesn't, and that can be really powerful and important. So, Kathy, do you have something?
Yes, let me unmute me there.
Hmm.
I apparently have one of those kind of faces. People, yeah, tell me stuff, and most people are battling something. So, Gene, I am delighted that is not part of your life. Yay. And and I worry about our caregivers, our pastors, our psychologists, our the folks who
Family,
take
yeah,
care of folks that are caregivers, they quite often don't have anybody to take care of them. So, you know, that's a problem.
yeah, yeah, very much,
Anyway,
very
so
much.
for what it's worth, we got you back.
I'd like to add something though. My
Yeah,
life is fabulous, but I am a scam specialist, and every week I lead a counseling session for people who are suicidal. They have
Hmm.
lost everything financially,
hmm
but worse than that is they've lost their confidence in themselves to recognize the difference between reality and fantasy, and they are just killing themselves, that they could be under the ether is what we say, and hypnotized, and that how could this happen, how could I do this, and they are, I'm just hoping I come back next week, I'm just hoping that they're going to stay alive. And so I'm so grateful that I have nothing challenging and I can be for people who have lost everything.
yeah, yeah. Thank you, Bill. Do you have something?
Yeah, I had an encounter with somebody probably about a year ago, and it was over a political issue. Um, I thought the facts and Snopes agreed with me, and this other person just rejected that as being false, fake, and so it really soured our relationship. But through a series of events later with another person who was a kind of a common mutual friend, I discovered that this guy grew up in a family that was abusive. Everybody speaks unkindly of each other. When their father died, which happened recently, they all just told awful stories about their father because they just disliked their parents so much. And I realized that, yeah, there was a backstory. I didn't understand, of course, what was the backstory, but and I'm not a psychologist, so maybe Glenn could unpack it better, but I still realized that, yeah, this affected him greatly, and for whatever reason, he took political stances that he did, growing out of some deep pain and hurt that's generational.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Bill. Hmm. Well, I don't want to drag us out here tonight, but I would like to bring this back around uh, to finish with hearing some of your feedback around our church. Littleton United Methodist is, and you all know it way better than I do, but it's got the full partisan spectrum of people in the congregation. How do you see us being a place for the exhausted? I mean, if 70% of Americans are in this exhausted category, who desperately want compromise, who desperately want to find the place of common ground. I mean, how do you think we as a congregation, and me as a pastor, can be a constructive place for folks in a season like we're living in now? All right, let's see. Gravel's unmuted first, then Kim.
I think one of the templates that we have to have in mind is empathy. If we look at another person and look beyond what they're saying to develop an empathy, and I think the whole meeting tonight has that theme really, is to look beyond the obvious with the vitriol stuff we're hearing perhaps, or the indifference or whatever it is that's so bothersome to us, to go, what is the origin of this? What's the history behind this person? And I think all of us that are trained in various ways to do that, we're called upon repeatedly to do that. Why are they behaving the way they are? It seems so adverse with what we see as a reality, and then also to say, could I have a wrong slant on this? Is this a spirit of apology that's needed here in order to bring this around? Not just what's the origin of their difficulty. Sometimes it is pretty apparent when we learn, as the stories that we've been recounted tonight, that this person has had a lot of adversity and they're responding to it. It could be physical health, where they just feel terrible all the time. And we know people like that, and they growl at other people, or they're indifferent, or they're angry at the world situation, when they're really responding out of anger and hurt and physical and mental pain. And I heard something like that, which I won't recount, in a luncheon this morning with a very close friend who was in tears about a granddaughter. And it was exactly around those kinds of issues, that cluster of things. In this case, it wasn't that he was doing anything wrong, but he was called on to the very depths of compassion and empathy from what he was hearing from somebody that he loved.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Kim, what did you have to lift up?
Well, a couple of weeks ago when we had this, I wasn't here last week, and I probably should have been, because I think you talked about the category that I fit under, but I couldn't. Um, I had been pretty vocal in that gathering, and at the end of the meeting, when Julie said that she felt like she was obviously on the other end of the political spectrum from the rest of us, I felt so sad that that I had been so vocal, and really concerned that maybe I had hurt her. I couldn't remember what I had said that I felt that about, but I've looked for her since at church and I haven't seen her, and I really would love to to just connect with her and talk with her about it, because if I hurt her, I certainly didn't mean to. And I think that's something we all need to be aware of, that, we may be around people that we think we have the same convictions because we go to the same church, because we attend the same Sunday school class, or we're in the same choir, but we forget that there's more to that person. And I've really I've felt so sad about it ever since. So if any of you, I just want to apologize if I've offended anybody, and I think if there's an awareness of that, um, and a common respect, that it would help all of us.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Shirley, you'll need to unmute. You'll have to find your button there.
Or just hold down your space bar.
Oh, that's right. You can do that. Yeah. There you go.
I think my thing is listening. I just feel that everybody has a story, and I don't know, listening, really listening. I mean, not with your mind someplace else, but it helps me to know where other people are. And we have a member of the family that doesn't always show up the same. And I just try to listen and write it out, and hope for the next time, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Well, yes, Sue.
I think as far as advice for our pastor and advice for our church is, I don't know if I can add much, but sometimes when I get confused or angry or wondering about what's, why am I not seeing things right? I really wonder if the basis of my faith is not as solid as my basis of other beliefs. And so somehow a way of learning how to strengthen the basis of our faith and the fundamentals and what that means in practicality, so that we can see the chaos in the world as chaos in the world, but foundationally, it won't affect us as much when our foundational faith is stronger. Because I really do wonder somehow, sometimes, do I not understand what the teachings of Jesus are? And I think it's true, I don't. And or I forget, or or I never had it in the first place.
Yeah. 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 Well, I think it's one of the things that Russell Moore shared early on this evening was about, this has happened a lot over the last number of years, where pastors are at the door after the service, and somebody comes by and the pastor had preached Jesus, and the person lambasts them because they were too conservative or they were too liberal in the sermon. And I think one of the things that going back to the very first session, and how this class is trying to get us to shift from being shaped by and living out of an ideology towards being shaped by and living out of our spiritual values, right? And I think one of the things that I hope to do as a pastor, and that I hope we could do as a church, is to lift those things up, and to really take seriously that there are going to be times when our spiritual values make us look liberal, and there are going to be times when our spiritual values make us look conservative, and we need to be open to both. And I think that's that humility, that we're talking about. Over the course of this class, I think, and that's super important. And part of what I hope for out of this class, that this is a group, and you all and the folks who participate later through the recording, that we form a core of people who have this perspective around how we can be together in a church family, and how we can be a place where we cultivate a different way of engaging with one another and engaging in the issues of the world around us, and that we were able to take a breath and do that, even when we feel super strong about a particular issue, that we take the time, and put the energy in to engage it, not just from a partisan political perspective, but from a spiritual perspective. And it may be that moves us to a different place. It may be that affirms what we're believing. It may be it really challenges what we believe about something. So that's my hope in doing this class in the first place, and for all of you to be kind of agents in our church, to encourage that kind of interaction and empathy and growth in our midst. So, David, you unmuted.
One thing I didn't grow up a Methodist, but one thing I kind of like about Methodism, I guess it is there isn't really one thought. It really is a lot of different thoughts and people, ideas and beliefs and things like that. And so, if we really want to be inclusive, then we should be inclusive of everyone, regardless of politics. And I do actually follow Adam Hamilton on Facebook from the Resurrection Church out in Kansas City. And during the elections, I mean, he was just putting out some really powerful messages that were so unpolitical that you couldn't help but say, yeah, that's right. The thing he's kind of obnoxious because he's a Kansas City Chief fan, but uh, but I mean, he just has that as a way of saying things, and he'll have like a 1 minute blurb on Facebook or something, just a short statement of how, what's going on, and just sort of this concept of what Christianity is, and different than politics. So I don't know if that's helpful or whatever, but it really helps me when I see what he's during. I mean, it was nasty during, people just were ready to leave the country, ready to do every other thing. And, it's just very calming. So anyway.
Yeah. Good. All right. Well, anybody have anything that's burning on your heart or mind that you would like to
One
chime in
last
with?
thing, it's ironic because before this started, I was watching the PBS evening news, and Judy Woodruff, is that her name? She's doing a series on the American Crossroads, and it's about this subject of liberals and conservatives getting together. And she was in Kentucky, meeting in a small town where, they used to be relying on coal, and their economy's gone, and how, and so she got these people, and somebody wrote a book. I can't remember the name of the book but she was the one that was out there, and they formed a group like this for an hour session or a day-long session. They got these people together, just talking honestly about their views, and it's just sort of this idea again of building relationships with people that are different than you, and so kind of some healing happening, and not like they all agreed, but at the end they were playing bluegrass music together. So
Nice.
anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, David. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead, Tony, and then Kathy, and then we'll start
I'm
wrapping
sorry.
things up. No, go ahead, Tony. Yeah.
Okay. World Kindness Day is a week from tomorrow. So we can all do something on World Kindness Day to build relationships and connect with people. And then tomorrow night, All Sides and Newsweek are sponsoring conversations where they group you up with 4 or 5 people from diverse perspectives for a conversation all across the nation on Zoom connections. So there's a couple opportunities, to practice building connections and finding the common ground that's deeper than partisan politics, I guess.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Tony. Yeah. All right, Kathy, then Patricia.
Yeah, you were talking about the church. Things that I think are saving our church are we have lots of life affirming things, the music, the kids, the women's group, we used to have break bread, all those good, positive kinds of things. And I strongly think, Reverend Chris, that you may save us because every single sermon has been about, there's God's way and then there's the world's way. And you're picking God's way. And seeing that you remind us every week, eventually we may listen. It could happen.
So it's always good to hear how repetitive one is being as a preacher. That's it. Thanks,
Well,
Kathy.
it's a good thing.
All right. All right, Patricia, then we need to wrap things up here.
I just wanted to say, because I don't know how many of you get information from the conference, but in June, all of the different conferences around the nation and world and so forth, I guess in the US, we voted. And we voted on geographical changes. We voted on several different things. And actually, there were 4 that came up for amendments to the Constitution. And I call it the Blue Book. I always forget, but it's the whatever Methodist thing is. And I'm going to read something that Bishop Stone King put out after saying that all 4 passed, and all 4 passed by 90% or more. And it was the United Methodist Church will now be organized as a multiple regional conferences, a structure that eliminates the hierarchy of geography in our worldwide church. A commitment to inclusiveness has been strengthened, while at the same time we have affirmed our commitment to combating racism, racial inequality, colonialism, white privilege, and white supremacy. So it's been a long time coming. I mean, when you vote and they tell you you have to wait till November to know what the outcome was, because they literally took every single vote counted. It wasn't like, okay, Mountain Sky Conference, we voted yes, so that gets taken forward. So I was really pleased today to finally get the message that the vote went through. And I think it strengthens us as Methodists as being the open, loving and kind church. So just wanted y'all to know.
Yeah, thanks, Patricia. Thanks. All right. Well, it is time for us to wrap up for tonight, and we do have two more sessions next week and the week after, and we'll enjoy one another's company a couple more times here. So, thank you all, and I just want to thank you for the truly insightful conversation that we've been able to have over these weeks and again tonight. So thank you all for making this a rich time. So, all right, well, let me say a prayer and then we'll unmute and say goodnight to each other. All right. Oh, gracious God, we thank you so much for this time and for these siblings in faith and for your church and for calling us to be your church. We pray that you would give us the hope and the humility to be your people in this world and to be a witness to a different way of being, to your way of being in this world, and that we might be strong and courageous at the same time that we are being meek and mild, and that we live into that seeming paradox. God bless everybody who is on this call and everybody who is participating later. Help us to be your people in this world. It's in your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, unmute, say goodnight.
Good night,
Good
everyone.
night.
Good night.
Everybody.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye, all.
Bye.
Good
Yeah.
night.
Night.